Hi, you two. I am Charles Bishop. I'm a local acupuncturist. Um, I am a general practitioner in terms of acupuncture, but I do have a special passion for sleep and also women's health. I practice at 1910 West Highway 61, so I'm in the same building as Statewide Insurance. We've been up here about 3 years, and yeah, that's the gist of it. We're here tonight to talk about sleep, doing kind of a deep dive on it. Um, Sleep is a and sleep medicine is a really vast subject that's evolving. We're going to touch on it kind of equally from a Western standpoint and a traditional East Asian medicine standpoint. Obviously, traditional East Asian medicine is my specialty. That's where I do my work. Um, but I think it's helpful to kind of understand and look at all parts of the knowledge of sleep medicine that we can, easily grasp and get into in a 2-hour lecture, so that we have different areas we can enter discussion into. Again, my specialty is traditional East Asian medicine, so I think I can have a little bit more depth in my conversation there. But I'm happy to get into anything we go over today. It's a pretty small class, so I'm happy for you two to chime in really whenever you'd like. All right, I'm going to share my screen. And this should work. All right, you guys can see it? All right.
We can see it. And Nancy, Charles, you will share these with us, won't you?
Yes, I'll create a PDF of it. I usually send it out beforehand, and I just have not had time today yet.
Okay, I thought maybe I forgot to check my email. So Nancy, you will get copies of all of these. Okay, you're all set. All right. Thanks, Charles.
Of course, of course. So the medicine of a good night's sleep. I use this image to start just because I think that the imagery of the moon and nighttime and the waters that we often kind of represent the unconscious can kind of bring us into the headspace of sleep. So very quick disclaimer. I just try to always add this to a class that in this specific class, sleep science and medicine are vast. It's an evolving field. This is by no means a comprehensive discussion. There's so much information here, and we're going to kind of do an overview of a lot of it and go hopefully in depth with a little bit of it. But please use these ideas presented as a springboard to further study, not as the entirety of the medicines. Also, nothing in this class is intended to diagnose or treat specific individuals. Please consult your preferred healthcare practitioner before beginning any new medications, supplements, exercise regimens, or major lifestyle changes. You are responsible for your own healthcare decisions. I'm not promoting anything. We're having a discussion. I just wanted to make that clear. All right. So starting off, we're going to go back and forth a little bit between East Asian medicine and Western medicine, or yes?
Your thing about your new message is blocking. Yeah. Okay.
You guys can see that. Okay. Hopefully that will stop coming up. So we're going to skip back and forth a little bit between traditional East Asian medicine ideas and Western medicine ideas. And because I want to kind of tie them together, and there's a lot of interplay and similarity, but there's never a one-to-one correspondence. So we're going to talk first about yin and yang, and we're going to see that come up again and again, and kind of what we talk about, even with the Western medicine aspects and with neurotransmitters and all sorts of things. But we never want to say, yin is this, yang is that, and other concepts are equal to analogous concepts in Western medicine. We want to kind of keep them separate, but see how they interplay together. So yin and yang are fundamental. Anyone watching this has a good concept of the main ideas behind yin and yang, but they are so fundamental to this discussion. Sleep and nighttime being very yin, wakefulness and daytime being very yang. And if we don't have a really strong grasp of it, a lot of things are not going to make sense on the East Asian medicine front, especially. So of course, this is the traditional Taiji or Yin Yang symbol. And something that I always want to point out that's very interesting to me is in terms of healthy physiology for humans and our planet and where we exist, this is the correct directional depiction where we have black yin, and I'm not sure if you can see my pointer, but black yin kind of coming up on top and warm white yang coming down beneath. The reason being is yang is very much represented by the sun and the heavens and heat, and yin is very much the earth and coolness and darkness. And so our job in physiology and as humans is to integrate yin and yang. And so we need to bring yin upwards and have yang sit underneath it. So it's sort of the energy is underneath the substance. And that way since yin naturally wants to go down and yang naturally wants to go up, you know, as a theoretical concept, they'll mix. And we'll see this interplay much more clearly soon, but I just wanted to bring that up directly. A few kind of correlations. Yin is night, it's dark, it's cold. I don't know, like the word negative, but it's passive or resting. It tends to be associated with female, and that, depending who you talk to. It's solid, meaning it's substantive. And then here are some organs we're going to be talking about in depth: the liver, the heart, the spleen, the lungs, and the kidneys, which are in essence the yin organs. Give me one second. I'm going to just close something, and hopefully those will not be coming back. Those notifications will not come back up. And the yin organs, we're talking about sleep and nighttime. The yin organs are of paramount importance, and we'll come right back to them in a second. So yang is day, it's light. Light is very important. We'll talk about that again. It's warmth. So big changes in temperature, especially towards the warming spectrum, very yang. That's going to become important again. Positive, active, male. Hollow, I think of it more as intangible. So yang is heat and activity. It's not something that has substance in and of itself, but it gives the potential for action, or it warms things up so they can have action. And then some yang organs that we won't talk about as much, but in further depth are important is gallbladder, small intestine, stomach, large intestine, and urinary bladder. And one reason they use the word hollow is the yang organs tend to be organs of transport and digestion. So they're hollow, in which substance travels through them, but they don't tend to hold on to things. They're moving things through and digesting them. So a very active organ. All right, so why do we sleep? This seems like a very obvious question. It can actually be quite difficult in terms of scientific answers because they're looking for specific changes of what happens when you sleep, what happens when you don't sleep, what are the evolutionary aspects of why we sleep, and that can be pretty intricate. But I think keeping it very simple and very relatable, the really easy answer is just restoration. We all sleep so we can rest, so we can recharge. It's actually when we do our growing, our tissue repair, and anyone who hasn't slept, we always say things like, I'm tired, I'm not recharged, I'm run down. So obviously sleep is about restoration on a physiological level, at least. There can be lots of other aspects that we associate with sleep, of course. There's a mounting evidence, and also pretty obvious, that has to do with brain plasticity. So it's both how we synthesize and really more long-term record information from our day. It's not just our short-term memory, it's really getting lodged deeper so that we can recall it much later. It helps reorganize kind of all the information and the light chaos of the day into some form of pattern recognition, so we can have make deeper connections. A lot of people report new ideas or new associations that they realize through dreams or after waking after a good night's sleep. And then similarly, without sleep, it's really hard to feel sharp and fluid in your mental functions. Regulation, a lot of hormone activity during sleep, and a lot of regulation just between that day and night cycle. Again, very broadly speaking, that yin yang cycle. And then unconscious processing. We're not going to talk very much about this, but there's so many ideas in the theory of the brain, theory of mind, that our conscious mind is very much the tip of an iceberg, and deep underneath the waters of where we're not specifically conscious of processing, there's so much activity under there. And so sleep is a big aspect of that. And we will talk about that more in terms of emotional processing as it relates to uh, traditional East Asian medicine. So there's some cycles of sleep, and this is going to be important too because um, we look at big yin yang cycles of day and night, but then also minute cycles within sleep itself and within the daytime itself. Um, but we tend to, have a period of falling asleep, and then we sink deep into. And so NREM is non-rapid eye movement sleep. Um, so this is times when we're not dreaming, our bodies are doing a lot of hormonal work. There's a lot of repair. Um, uh, there's ideas of our liver cleansing our blood, so kind of changing our blood chemistry to again repair and get rid of metabolites that we accumulated throughout the day, metabolites in the brain that accumulate and increase our need for rest or our sense of being tired. So those are all kind of cleansed during that deep sleep, non-rapid eye movement sleep. And then we kind of come out of it into this short bursts of rapid eye movement. That's essentially dreaming. And what's very interesting is non-REM sleep, our body's asleep and our mind's asleep. There's activity in our body, but sensation and everything, we're out. Our mind is essentially non-active. We have these deep, slow wave sleep, delta waves. Um, and then we come out into this relatively superficial sleep called REM sleep, where our mind is active and our body is asleep. And in some ways, our bodies are more active. Like you might have more twitching, or your temperature might rise a little bit, but our minds release our brains release a essentially a paralysis potion so that we don't act out our dreams. So we go through a period of active brain time during REM sleep, go back down into a very deep sleep state, come up into REM sleep. And as we go through the night, our REM, rapid eye movement, dreaming, keeps increasing its threshold. And we kind of, between those, go into less deep and less deep sleep states until eventually we kind of wake up. Um, Usually, and we'll get more into this in a second, usually at this period after the last rapid eye movement state, there's a little burst of cortisol in our system to kind of ignite our wakeful mood and our wakeful state. Um, and so, again, we'll talk more about this later, but REM sleep is a lot of mental processing and emotional processing. And we can think about also nightmares sometimes as being stuck in the processing state and not being able to move through it, whether it's because of fear or stress or all sorts of other reasons. Again, just a quick overview of stages of sleep. Some people say 4 stages, some people say 5 stages. I think 5 is becoming more common just to have a little bit more differentiation. Um, but the first state is light sleep, transitional period, your body temperature is really starting to go down. Um, you may fall asleep, you may wake up again, you might twitch, but essentially you're descending towards sleep. Same with stage 2, your respiration really starts slowing, your heart rate decreases, you cool down further. And then again, you're on this decline, and then you hit the deep sleep first, usually. Um, Slow, steady brain waves, little bursts of activity, but essentially your body and your mind are out. A lot of body repair, immune system maintenance, um, and then we go to the rapid eye movement that we were just talking about, where there's also learning, recall, organization. And this is a sleep cycle. We call each stage of sleep, all 5 together, is a sleep cycle. So you go through one sleep cycle. Usually, I think it's 90 to 110 minutes, so hour and a half to 2 hours. Um, and we can see dysregulation in that with people who are having trouble sleeping, especially if they're waking up during the night. Um, but generally, it's about that long. And then I think as the rapid eye movement period increases, the overall cycles get a little bit shorter. But that's kind of the idea. Um, One reason also that with napping, if you fall really deeply asleep, maybe you're sleep deprived and you're taking a nap, if you hit these deep, slow wave sleep states and you're really out, you're very hard to wake up similarly at night. But if you wake up from an alarm, from some activity outside during these deep wave sleeps, that's often when you wake up feeling really groggy and it takes a while to kind of enter the waking world again. Because you're going from essentially this deepest yin state and trying to shift rapidly to a yang state. So it's almost like the jet lag of sleep. You can't quite catch up. Um, since we're talking about stages of sleep, we should talk just sort of quickly about neuromodulators. Often some of these are referred to as neurotransmitters. The reason I use neuromodulator is some of these have a longer action than just transmission. And so, and they modulate our mental state and our, not just nerve transmission, but our whole mental state. So serotonin, modulator that promotes satisfaction and state of calm. It's a chemical precursor to melatonin, which we hear a lot about in regards to sleep, that promotes sleep and sleepiness. Some people supplement melatonin, and there's mixed mixed science around supplementation of melatonin. Part of that is that over-the-counter supplements vary widely in what they advertise as how much melatonin is in and what they actually contain. So it's really hard um, to know exactly what you're getting. And unless you're sticking with one supplement that is consistent for a long time, it's hard to kind of titrate to the level you might find useful. And then there are issues with habituating your body to taking melatonin and maybe not synthesizing or producing it on a regular cycle itself. Um, and melatonin is released cyclically daily in healthy adults. So we see this rise in melatonin in the evening, really crescendoing while we're asleep. Then it starts decreasing, and epinephrine and dopamine and cortisol kind of increasing in the morning. Um, so those are the two neuromodulators associated with sleepiness and sleeping. And the dopamine is more a modulator that promotes action and is associated with gratification or reward. We hear about dopamine in terms of release with exercise. We hear about it in terms of its pathways involved with drugs and addiction and with uh, completing activities and feeling, a sense of gratification or reward with them. So it kind of pushes us with this dopamine, pushes us with a sense of looking for um, gratification or a sense of completeness. So it motivates us towards movement and action, whereas it's a precursor to epinephrine and adrenaline, which are actually forcing our body into upregulating the sympathetic nervous system, stimulating agitation and desire to move. So quick overview of those guys. We're going to talk a little bit more about serotonin and melatonin as it relates to sleep, but I wanted to mention them just because we can't really talk about the science of sleep without them. But it's not something that I don't focus often my explanations or work around them, even though they're obviously involved. It's just that I expect them to regulate through other methods as opposed to trying to supplement them through uh, diet sometimes, but not so much through supplements or medication. Hopefully, of course, there's always time for different medications to be very helpful. All right, so body temperature during the day. Um, Again, this is starting kind of in the deep part of the sleep cycle, it goes all the way down to morning, to right before we're about to wake up, and this will shift very much based on what your waking activity is. So a shift worker, the time frame of their body temperature during the day will shift dramatically. You'll see this whole graph shifted to the right or shifted to the left depending on when someone's awake and when someone's asleep. Although it does tend to correlate with sun activity somewhat. So um, we're going to get back to natural rhythms and personal rhythms and trying to align them as much as possible. But we see this big drop in body temperature. So again, our body shifting towards coolness, towards this very yin state, going down all the way to right before we start waking up, and then you get this cortisol boost. Your body starts waking up. You your body temperature rises and rises all the way throughout the day. This graph, more than other ones I've seen, has our body temperature peak pretty late in the evening. It looks like 8 p.m. or so. It seems the consensus is on the average adult working normal hours or awake normal hours, maybe peaking more 4 to 6 p.m., but with some seasonal differences. But this is more just to get the idea of this big wave and shift throughout the day. Again, following our wakefulness and sleep cycles and light cycles. So we're going to shift back to East Asian medicine and the 5 elements, the yin organs and emotions. There are so many ways to classify um, processes in the body in East Asian medicine, and we talk about them in terms of organ and organ function and meridians or channel and energy flow, which are essentially extensions of the organs. Um, we talk about the 5 elements, so in terms of fire, earth, metal, water, and wood, and associations with them, both associations with the organs, associations with emotions. And you don't really have to understand this in depth to think about sleep. The reason we use it is we find all of these correlations with, especially 5 element theory, that we can look at organ systems, emotions, heat in the body, yin and yang, and we can put all of this together through a differential diagnosis in East Asian medicine to see what processes are exuberant and overabundant and what processes are um, underfunded and weaker in the body, and where those balances or imbalances are, so that we can try to get things lined up again, or um, even push something in the other direction a little bit if we need to, if the focus is really on sleep or any other health issue. Um, so really quick, we start with water and the kidneys. This is kind of the deep energy. It's very cooling. Um, and one thing we look at a lot in water energy, because we're always often, unfortunately, focused on pathology, because I hate to say this, but we're always trying to fix something. Um, Fear is an emotion that comes up a lot in the water element, and the ideas around that is if we see a big process around fear and nightmares and falling asleep and coming out of that, it might be working more with the water element or kidney energy, similar with wood and the liver, and anger or resentment or frustration or even rage. A lot of heat at the top of the body, especially for wood, uh, the heart, anxiety, or kind of a sense of being too manic. So um, there's someone I work with for sleep often that they can get very anxious about falling asleep if they have something the next day that they have to do. So they need their sleep so they can function really well the next day. And then they get anxious about the sleep and then they can't sleep very well. So it's kind of a really poor cycle for them. So we work a lot with the heart system and other systems that are going to help regulate that heart system, um, to not have this intense heat and anxiety that's just keeping them awake. They can't kind of cross that threshold. Um, Spleen, the earth, and worry or overthinking is something we see a lot. We talk about worry and overthinking as using up substances in the body, which we'll get to in a minute, but also knotting the chi, so things aren't flowing very smoothly. Um, Similar to um, overthinking or like working on the computer all day and being very sedentary and using your mind a lot. Um, you're not getting a good energy flow through your body, and you're having all this energy build up at the top of your head. And then when you try to fall asleep at night, everything's up here, and your body has too much kind of nervous energy, but you can't kind of get out of your head, get out of your chest, and let things settle down. Um, and then metal in the lungs. I often, of course, with deep grief or deep sorrow, you can see um, some sleep issues come up. But what we often see with the lungs, and we'll come back to this in just a second, is if someone's processing grief or sorrow, or they just have a lot of lung energy or energy trapped in their lungs, which, if you have strong lungs, that can be a great thing. Um, But there's a time of day in the early morning when we think of the circuit of energy in your body. There's more energy in the lungs just naturally during that time of the day. And if someone already has a buildup of energy in the lungs, that will pop them out of sleep. And we can see this with any organ, of course, but I often see this in the sort of 3 to 5 a.m. time slot with the lungs. And it will at least give us a hint to explore that dynamic more closely. Um, this is a really deep topic with lots of interrelated elements and different ways that things interact. Um, Someday I'd love to teach a class just on 5 element theory because it's so interesting to me. But we had to cover it briefly because it is integral to East Asian medicine in most aspects. Um, Again, just really quick with the 5 elements. They also have chi movements or just general movements. Water tends to flow down. If you pour water on the ground, it always seeks the lowest place. It doesn't pile up high on a branch. It always falls to the lowest area that will contain it. Wood has an expansive quality, so it's upward and outward. Um, we see that with the emotion anger, like things kind of move up really quickly, or people get red in the face. Um, the the season of springtime is a very wood element time. Things are coming up and out, and often people have a increased difficulty sleeping in springtime. Everyone's different. There's a lot of individual variability, but the wood element has a lot to do with that for sure. Fire moves upwards. You can think of that anxious patient I was talking about. They get anxious, and it's like all their energy is simmering upwards, even though they're really trying to sink down into sleep. And it's just two things moving against each other and not working. Um, Earth is a very central energy or a very good pivot, and so it's the idea of going back to like Earth having or the Earth element and overthinking, knotting your energy. It's like everything's sitting in a clump. It's not moving. So Earth is very supportive, but often we see that it needs to get moving in some fashion. And then metal is very seeking inwards. It's moving inwards and has a consolidating action. Again, you don't have to remember this too closely. We'll talk about it when it's important, but uh, I always feel like it's necessary to cover that a little bit at least. All right. So now something that's a little bit more tangible. Um, we talk about substances in the body, and we're going to talk about yin and yang as substances, even though they're kind of theoretical concepts at the same time. Um, but these three substances have a lot to do with sleep and sleep patterns. Um, so much of the time when I'm working with someone for sleep issues, depending on what the sleep issue is, but especially if it has to do with falling asleep or staying asleep, I am very closely looking at blood and blood quality. And this is a little bit of a different concept than anatomical blood, although there's tons of overlap. Um, the idea of blood, though, very much like the anatomical blood, is it nourishes tissues and organs. Um, and here's where it moderates things. It sends messages through the body. We think of it as carrying emotions. So the way to think about this is if you have really strong repetitive emotions or something that's just way overwhelming or something you can't process and has been just kind of a repeated pattern, whether it's trauma or anger and frustration or anything at all, um, your body is trying to, in the East Asian medicine sense, your body is trying to process and moderate how much that emotion is affecting you by essentially holding it in your blood. And the way that works partially is that strong emotions both have chi movements, but they also consume your resources. We think of it as consuming your blood. And this is an idea of blood deficiency where you can see a lot of paleness. So like the tongue will look pale, the inner canthus on the inner part of the eye will look pale. Um, it might be hard for someone to concentrate. There might be a lot of dryness on their skin. Things aren't being nourished. And if this is the case, it's really, we think of the blood also kind of housing the different spirits that we talk about in the body, which are intricately related to emotion. So essentially, your consciousness and your different aspects of your psycho-emotional life can't sink deep into your body to process because the blood is not strong enough to essentially house them, is how we talk about it. And it sounds funny, but the main takeaway is if you have blood deficiency, it can be really hard to fall asleep. It can be really hard to stay asleep, and it can be hard to have your body function optimally in essentially any capacity. Um,
So when
and
you're
then
talking about this, Charles, are you saying like um, you identify these issues that are happening, and then you would talk about sleep, talk about problems with sleep, then you would identify some things through your um, through I don't know how to say it, through your through the processes that you use in your practice, and then you fix them somehow, and that makes you, or you work on them somehow, and then that makes you sleep better.
yes, and what eventually I'm getting at also is that we think of sleep as, yes, a process with the body, but also very much a mental process in some
Mm.
ways. Like why can't we just turn off? And so um, there's a really great quote from someone I'll mention in a bit, Dr. Andrew Huberman from Stanford, and he says it's really hard to affect or change the mind with just the mind. So we talk a lot about affecting the mind and mentality and emotions through the body, and vice versa. Using our mind to help our body relax, like with progressive relaxation therapy techniques. So um, the idea is, yes, we would look at the relative quality and quantity of these substances, and it's not. I hate saying quantity because we don't, measure it. We just look at relative values for somebody in terms of manifestations from their body, from their pulse, from coloration, from um, just reports of how their day and how their days and their how their body functions, and then figure out what's the weakest link or weakest links, and try to work on supplementing them, or usually supplementing or counterbalancing, but occasionally kind of drawing away from or decreasing a substance if we have to. Although we basically never talk about trying to decrease someone's, quality or amount of blood. Essentially, it's you. The more you have, the better, and it will it will be a very moderating force in the body. So blood actually sits kind of between yin and yang in that comparative to yin, which we'll talk about in a second. It's warm and it's moving and it's active, but compared to yang, it actually has a cooling effect, and it is hydrating. And so uh, blood sits in the middle as this substance we can look at and work. And these are all, substances more or less that we can work with. So yes, we would, um, in my medicine and my practice of East Asian medicine, we would look at these as very broad scope things to work with, and then look at minutia underneath it. Like, what's causing a depletion of blood? Is it poor diet? Is it overactivity? Is it the poor sleep is causing blood deficiency, and then the blood deficiency is helping or not helping you sleep deeply? Um, and kind of where can we enter to create the best effect? Does that answer your question?
It did. I have one more question from something you
Sure.
said a few minutes ago about the lungs and um, the energy in the lungs. How do you get energy in the lungs just like working out or being like really fit? Does that cause more energy in the lungs?
Yeah. So um, going back, I'm just going to go back to this five element idea. Um, if you if you see these arrows, they're always kind of either generating the next element. So there's a cycle that's moving around, and I'll come back to that in more depth in a minute. Um, and there's counterbalances. So things are trying to keep other elements in check and generate other elements. So there should be a relative balance, but everyone has a specific constitution and specific imbalances that are somewhat endemic to us, sort of just like everyone has strengths and weaknesses. And in this medicine, we can sometimes say that the strengths and the weaknesses are the same. Um, or let me put that differently. Really inherent strengths in the body can also cause problems. So you can increase your lung strength and capacity through working out, through breathing exercises, through different herbs and supplementation, through acupuncture, um, qigong, all sorts of things. Um, but sometimes people have, and again, I didn't mention this specifically with the organs, but the organs are similar to the anatomical organs, but it's also a system of processes in the body that we lump together in traditional East Asian medicine. And again, a big topic for a different time, but um, the idea being that if you have, you have all this different forms of energy in your body as we think about it, or energy that, or different areas that energy kind of coalesces and has different functions. And so if you tend to have really strong lung energy, um, so some examples of that would be, or some manifestations of that would be, when you breathe deeply, you might feel a slight sense of restriction because there's already kind of a lot there. It's hard to take in more. Um, or it takes a little while to warm up to exercise, but then you have great endurance. You can just keep going and going for a long time. Um, if you're
Oh,
someone with strong lung energy, and your energy just sits there, and I'm going to go ahead to a different slide for a second. So we're going to talk about the course of energy throughout the day, um, and this idea of a meridian clock. It's not necessarily that if you wake up between 3 and 5 a.m., you have incredibly strong lung energy, and that's something that needs to be counterbalanced. It just gives us a clue to look there. Does that help a little
yeah,
bit?
that is
Okay.
helpful. I mean, I hear people say that all the time. And I wake up every morning at 4:30. I have no problem going back to sleep, but it's
Mhm.
just like every time I check my watch, it's within 5 minutes.
Sure. And but you can go back to sleep, so
I
that's
can,
good.
yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, other people that I'm thinking about, I'm
Right.
just, I'm going to bring this knowledge, try to bring some knowledge to other people with this.
And we will get to pretty short notice. We'll get to some ideas of things we can do on our own to help shift sleep cycles.
Mhm.
But if things get really confusing, or someone gets really sick, it's really, I mean, this is a health medicine. It's really helpful to find somebody, whether it's traditional East Asian medicine and acupuncture, or a functional medicine doctor, or your primary care physician, or massage therapist. Just finding someone you can work with that can help you in that capacity, and help you work through kind of all the minutia, because there are lots of minutia that we're glossing over.
Yeah. Well, and I'm not asking, if you can take some information and say, hey, this is something I saw and I think it's useful, then you at least have a little bit of, you can push them in a direction. Like you can help yourself.
And a place to start. Um, so really quick, just going back to the other two substances that we already talked about a bit. Yin is a theoretical concept, but we also talk about it as a category of substances in the body. But um, it is, and we're talking about these as relationships, not necessarily as something is something else. So yin is has a strong relation in our medicine to hormones, to the idea of hormones, but it's not that hormones are only yin or anything like that, because there are hormones that have a very yang activity in the body, but they tend to be um, creating change, but in a physical state that is very yin. So like growth or reproduction or things like that. Um, but yin is calming, relaxing, it's hydrating, it counterbalances yang. It has a lot to do with hormones and our capacity to rest. So often we're looking at, the quality of yin substances in someone's body, how their hydration is, um, how the plasticity of their skin is in terms of like hydration and things like that, how the coating of their tongue looks for yin, um, in looking at what's the trouble with their capacity to rest. Why can't they slip into sleep? Why can't they stay asleep? Why is sleep not rejuvenating? What have you. Yang being very much the opposite. It's heat and activity in the body, it's reactivity. So one of the things that makes sleep a very yin state is we're not reactive to our external environment. We're sunk deep in ourselves. And, maybe a sound you hear is entering a dream state, which is a relatively active part of sleep. But normally while you're asleep, you're not reactive to sounds, although they can take you out of sleep if they're strong enough. And then yang is movement. So we're usually not moving while we're asleep, or at least not very much. Um, and so again, we're trying to figure out uh, often, why won't yin and yang kind of shift? What's the hang up there? And that brings us back to we were just talking about to this meridian chart. Um, we can look at both pathways of meridians in terms of changes on the skin. If something is cold or hot, we can often feel. Sometimes things feel puffy, so they feel very, very full. You can actually feel, with training, feel the puffiness of a meridian and see this feels really full, or wow, this channel feels really deflated. Um, and then all channels in the body and all organs have energy during the day. It's always there. But we do think in this medicine, in East Asian medicine, that um, throughout the day, there's a slightly higher propensity of energy and blood in different channels and organs. So different processes are taking prominence during the day. Um, like you think of that old adage of you should really eat breakfast. I can't remember what the saying is, but breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Debatable, but we look at the early morning, we see all these digestive organs in this medicine too. So just kind of some correlation and overlap to describe this meaning. But throughout the day, we see different circuits of qi, which are uh, four organs at once, starting with the lung, large intestine, stomach, and spleen, having a lot to do with digestion and energy movement. Then we get into heart, small intestine, bladder, and kidney. Not as obvious, but in this medicine has a lot to do with emotions and heat regulation, to put it extremely simplistically. And then we get to the pericardium or heart protector, the triple energizer, which is just kind of spaces in the body and the way hormones and the substances blood and yin and yang and everything kind of moves throughout the body. Of course, there's blood vessels and other things too, but we talk about the triple energizer or the triple warmer or the triple heater as three spaces in the body that house the organs, the gallbladder and the liver. And these have a lot to do with initiating sleep and actually, interestingly, a lot to do with light perception and how light affects us and reactivity to all external stimuli. Um, and these are the organs too that we look a lot at with sleep issues and especially with falling asleep. Um, I do a lot of trying to balance the pericardium and gallbladder, which are kind of opposites for people having a lot of trouble falling asleep. Um, Not always, everyone has individual issues, but that's one that comes up a lot. And I look a lot at the liver and triple energizer balance for people that are waking up during the night, especially in the middle of the night. Once you get towards that early morning lung time, it might be something different. And we might want to work with it in a different way, which we'll see in a second. Um, but also, the liver and the pericardium have a lot to do with the movement and quality of blood in the body. So one of the reasons we look at or another connection with looking at blood quality and its moderating force to help us fall and stay asleep. So some broad ideas about interventions with traditional East Asian medicine. Kind of what are we doing? Like, of course, there's acupuncture and herbal medicine and cupping and tuina and moxibustion and qigong and all sorts of things, massage. Um, but each of those has special uses, of course, but also they tend to do some of these broad categories of things. So we might want to focus on rebuilding blood, rebuilding yin, replenishing, um, building up, essentially building up in sleep medicine someone's capacity to sleep. We might want to do releasing. So releasing the idea of stuck energy that's just really stuck in one organ system or one part of the body that when uh, the energy flow hits that area, it kind of creates tension or heat or something that wakes us up or keeps us from sleeping. Um, we see this a lot with stress also. We think of stress as like a buildup of tension in the body, or in East Asian medicine, a buildup of qi in uncomfortable fashion. So we might really try to release it or course it to get that unstuck. Balancing, looking at those dynamics between different organs, between different substances in the body, and saying, wow, when you're trying to fall asleep, you're anxious and hot. So there's kind of a lot of heat, a lot of yang. Maybe the heart system is overactive or agitated. And maybe that's because there's not enough blood or not enough yin to kind of cool and counterbalance. We try to balance, essentially this is a medicine of balance. Um, and then relaxing. Uh, Different qigong techniques, different meditation techniques, even just acupuncture itself, teaching the nervous system to relax. So going into that very parasympathetic rest and digest system. Um, a lot of times people during acupuncture go into a deep rest state or fall asleep even, and it's not like a really true sleep cycle for them, because often after about 20 minutes they might kind of wake up, 25 minutes on their own, just pop up and feel, oh, I'm kind of done. um, but it's interesting because it's a forceful way to kind of push you into that parasympathetic mode, and as you go in and out of parasympathetic back to sympathetic mode, or at least a wakeful and alert mode that that regulate upregulates that sympathetic mode, and it chooses that more often. um, we can see that as you shift in and out of those smoothly through interventions, or hopefully self meditation or other things, you're training your body to relax, and you're training your mind to let go and relax and drop in. So this is just my favorite graph. It incorporate, and you don't need to know anything. I just need to just show it really quick. On the outer edge, it has all the elements. Um, we see the different organs that are just abbreviated here: gallbladder, liver, lung, large intestine, the different times of day that they tend to manifest. So the lung is between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. You don't need to look at these things in here. These are just different connections between the meridians and different classifications. And then in the middle, we have this idea of yin yang. This everything is a wheel and a cycle. And we've talked about that a little bit, and we're going to come back to it. That um, we're looking at cyclical motion of day and night, cyclical motion of seasons. We're looking at cycles of ourselves, cycles of our body temperature throughout the day, cycles of hormones. It's really helpful for me, at least, to think of this intellectually as a wheel, and I like to think of it as a bike wheel. Um, because if you think of too much energy in a system or too much tension in a system, it's like one spoke of the wheel being far too tense. It will throw everything out of alignment, and it still can turn, but you're not going to roll smoothly down the street on that wheel. So we might want to loosen that spoke, release that tension, or we might want to tighten another spoke far away on the wheel to kind of counter that and true the wheel, get it flowing smoothly again. Or you can think of it as a lump in the tire, or overinflation or underinflation. We might need to put in or decrease a certain substance in the body, or at least its relative value to other substances in the body. Um, and I just like thinking of it as a bike wheel. It's the simplest mechanistic metaphor I can conjure. All right. Um, and I put this up just to remind us that you know, we're living all the time with these cycles that I already mentioned, but day and night, we're revolving around the sun. Our our Earth is a sphere. We're moving in essentially a circle. Um, we see cyclical motion of winter, spring, summer, and autumn. Um, and one of the best things we can do for our health and for sleep is to try to align with this at some level. We're not perfect. The world is messy. There's always trade-offs and choices we're making. But the more we can do to align with those elemental actions, like in spring, that upward and outward action, having more projects initiated, and saving things for springtime, or the idea of spring cleaning, um, or saying, just giving yourself some space and saying, why am I waking up a little early in spring? It might be slightly earlier sunlight. It might just be that spring energy, that wood energy coming up and out. Um, in summer, maybe not sleeping as much, and that being okay, staying up later with the later sunlight hours, being very much more active, having both active projects, but also active play, going to the boundary waters, camping, um, fishing, any outdoor activities you really like. Autumn, kind of, taking more time to uh, enjoy yourself and reflect on the year, and kind of get ready for winter. Eat more seasonally appropriate things like root vegetables, and late season fruits, um, hydrate our body uh, with um, uh, with cooked fruit and soups and things like that. And then winter, just knowing that we really shouldn't do as much. And there's a lot to do up here, including snow removal and things like that. Um, but just taking extra time and really trying not to extend our day with artificial lights so far into the evening. Of course, when it's getting dark at 3:30, we're gonna have lights on for a while and stuff. But taking account that we should maybe turn those down or turn off a few lights earlier in the evening and kind of create a more mellow atmosphere and try to get to bed significantly earlier and maybe even sleep in more if we're able to, and just align ourselves with the natural processes, because we are in it and part of it. And um, the more in sync we are, the smoother everything is. And of course, it's never going to be perfect. Um, and then knowing, if you're having to be very active in winter, maybe giving yourself more support and getting more massages, or taking more time to have a nice warm sauna in the middle of the day, or um, any various self-care activities if you're overtaxing yourself. All right. So how to get out of sync with our sleep? There's tons and tons of ways. Um, and talking about syncing up with day and night cycles, not just uh, issues of having too much or too little of a substance, but um, untimely light exposure. We've heard a lot about blue light, which can actually be very good for us for alertness in some senses, but blue light can actually uh, engage these receptors in our eyes that are not about vision, but are just about recording light levels, and essentially reset our circadian rhythm, telling us, hey, it's daytime or the day's extended, and interrupting the timely release of the hormones we need for sleep. So especially strong lights inside at night, looking at screens all the time for sure. Um, you don't necessarily want to wear blue blocker sunglasses all day, but in the evening it might be appropriate to really limit light exposure. Uh, Prolonged repetitive work. So working on the computer all day, or even if you have a very physical job, doing the same physical activity over and over, you're really putting all your energy into one capacity and not into all the different parts that make us human, all the different aspects of ourselves and our personalities, um, which again is normal. Most of us have to work. Most of us have things we like to do that we tend to put more energy into, but just trying to vary our activities, vary our concentration levels and our physical levels, getting up from the computer, taking a walk, getting some exercise, doing some stretching, if you do computer work, all that kind of stuff. Um, Excess stress, stress kind of builds up tension in our body. It depletes our resources. Um, it gives us, depending on what the stress is, it often gives us things to ruminate about, or uh, or I hate to be redundant, but stress about. Um, and so often one aspect is someone trying to go to sleep or waking up during the night and their mind's running, they're ruminating, and it might be about something trivial. It might be about things that are very dire or important to them. Um, but stress buildup can absolutely affect our sleep. We all know this, but we have to think about it and mention it. And then we've talked about this already, but we talk so much about emotions in traditional East Asian medicine and how they affect our energy, how they affect our resources, our blood, our yin, our yang, um, and just trying to through meditation, through therapy, through hanging out with friends, um, just reflect on your emotions and how strong they are, and maybe you uh, no one thinks you get angry, but you actually get really angry really quick, but you just keep it all inside and you don't show it. That's going to have obviously very deleterious effects. Or any emotions that come up a lot can describe areas of your physiology that are um, out of balance in some fashion. So if someone has a lot of fear, we might look into that in terms of that water fire balance, and trying to really, whether it's emotionally or physically, warm them up and get them outside of themselves. Or of course, they may be fearful for very specific and reasonable reason. And so trying to figure out ways to address that, whether it's through, um, leaving a dangerous situation, um, or going into therapy to really work deeply with the emotions. But emotions have a huge, huge effect. And we can often look at if any emotion is coming up when someone's having trouble sleeping, whether it's falling asleep or waking up, that can give us a lot of clues as to what's going on there. All right, so how do we get back on track? If we're dysregulated, if we're out of sync, what are some tools and tricks we can do to work on these? And a lot of these I'm going to kind of touch on and just mention. So each and every one has a lot of nuance and specificity. Uh, you know, different meditations. You want to look deeply into those. Obviously, we can't go through them too much in depth right now. Um, but let's just kind of go over some of them. Things we can do at home and on our own to kind of try to regulate our day-night cycles. We've probably all heard about sleep hygiene. I also like to call it sleep signaling. So rituals and routines before and around bedtime that promote quiescence and signal the mind and body that sleep is approaching. So um, having a routine or some rituals that you try to do at the same time of night, or at least I like to think of at the same time of day-night cycles. So you might do it much earlier in the winter and much later in the summer, obviously just kind of following the sun. Um, but routines help us kind of get on track in terms of timing, and rituals give us these strong signals that we uh, hopefully things that we like that can help us and our body just existentially understand that it's okay, it's time to sleep. We got time to start shifting into that parasympathetic mode. Um, so routine bedtimes, calming tea before bed, a foot bath. I recommend foot baths almost all the time to people who are having trouble, especially falling asleep, but staying asleep too. Um, so a foot bath is a warming activity, but it's interesting. It's just your feet. So we in our society, not everyone, but a lot of us, the vast majority of people I've seen, have so much energy in our head and energy in our chest. So we have all this emotional energy and all this mental energy, and hopefully we're getting good exercise, but the vast majority of our day is spent using our eyes heavily, using our minds heavily, and maybe being very reactive emotionally, whether it's strong or not strong emotions, just the routine um, emotional activity, including with advertisements, and everything's trying to get a rise out of us. Everything's dire or important, and we really need to act on this thing now. And so all the time our sympathetic nervous system, our fight or flight, or is just being blinking on and being engaged. And so finding a way to really cool that down. A foot bath can be really lovely. Not only is it warm and relaxing, but it's polar. So you're just heating your feet and hopefully not using your eyes too strongly, sitting in a relaxing chair. And what it's doing is the warmth is actually helping draw down some of this chi, some of this yang from your upper body. And the yang meridians all travel down towards the earth. They all travel in a downward direction. And so it kind of draws that energy down towards the water. And you can do, all sorts of mental activity or mental visualizations or exercises where you say, um, that all that tension is sinking into the water and it's drifting off into the water table or into the water cycle, and it will evaporate there, and it's not in me anymore. It's Go ahead, Nancy.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just wanted to say, I have found that, and when I see this, my husband likes to watch the news at night.
Hmm.
So often I say to him, it's just too much for me. And that's
Absolutely.
probably part, I guess I didn't think of, I mean, I thought of it that way, but I thought, well, maybe it's just kind of me. But as I'm seeing in writing, it's not, maybe not just me that finds the tone of the voices and the pictures. It's like, how can I watch this and then walk off and jump in bed?
Right, and everyone has individual variability, as
Right.
I always say. So your husband might watch TV fine and sleep well and be happy. um, And even just the TV at night, just that light on you, it's
Yeah.
really signaling your brain too, like, engage, be awake, be alert.
Mm-hmm.
So there's kind of a whole host of things right there that are not helping for
Not
sleep.
good for it. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Interesting. Interesting.
And then the last thing I wanted to say with the foot baths, with that warmth, it's doing two things. So it's drawing heat and energy through those yang meridians down towards your feet, towards the earth. But then it's also at the same time, all the yin meridians travel upwards, and they tend, I mean, this is this is only partially true. They tend to be cold or underfunded with energy. And so you're warming these yin meridians that have a lot to do with sleep and that parasympathetic mode. And so they're warming and relaxing and just getting a little bit more energy towards the yin meridians and the yin organs, the heart, the liver, the lungs, the spleen, the kidneys for sure, and especially pericardium. They're warming and relaxing so that you can, everything can release and relax. And then of course it's just great for de-stressing because it's a lovely, pleasant activity. Um, and with the foot bath, you can use Epsom salts, you can use essential oils, especially like something like lavender that's calming, but really just the warmth, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, you can listen to a podcast or listen to some music, but trying to really rest your eyes if you can. Um, Turning down the lights, again, signaling your body, especially overhead lights. The receptors that signal daytime and signal our alertness, uh, because of the optics in our eyes, tend to be on the light that we receive on the bottoms of our eyes tends to uh, make us more alert. So overhead lights kind of with the angle hit us at the bottom of the eyes a little bit stronger. So floor lights will be a little bit less disruptive, although low lighting is, I think, the more important factor. Um, Meditation, prayer, other routines that are calming, repeated nightly before bedtime. Again, just signaling your body it's time for bed. Um, I was just mentioning this, the low lighting and reduced screen time is important. Strong or direct light can signal our body that the day is extended. It's just telling us, be alert, wake up. It's still daytime, and it is postponing the release of those neuromodulators and hormones that are helping us fall asleep and maintain sleepiness and sleep. And then temperature is actually really important too. Our body can cool at night, and cool bedroom temperatures can promote rest for not everyone, but for many people, especially cool bedroom temperatures with sufficient covers. Um, and conversely, interestingly, a warm shower or bath or a warm foot soak in the evening can help because there's a rebound cooling effect. So after you get out, you've kind of vented some of this heat and your body starts to cool down, trying to maintain homeostasis. So you'll cool down. There's evaporation off your skin if you've done a whole body soak of any sort. Um, and that cooling effect will put you in a slightly sleepy yin parasympathetic state. Um, I don't want to go into this in too much depth, but light, and I'll give you a resource. You can look really in depth into this later, a great podcast called the Huberman Lab. But uh, light, the science behind it right now is that light is the signal that kind of tells us how our circadian rhythm should manifest, but temperature is the effector. So light signals these parts of our brain that then regulate the temperature in all of our cells, and that's what actually regulates our sleepiness and wakefulness. Um, and so these are both areas that you can work on to uh, affect your sleep. Um, One last thing with light, if you wake up in the middle of the night, you find yourself awake to use the restroom or even awake for an extended period of time, really important to get the least light you can. Of course, be safe, turn on lights so you can see if you're going to the restroom, if you need to see where you're going, or have like a very small night light or something, or really dim phone lighting or anything to get to where you need to go, and whatever's most comfortable for you. But knowing that even modest light in the middle of the night, especially between 11 a.m. and 4 a.m., can really reset your brain and kind of signal, hey, let's release some cortisol, let's wake up, let's start the day, even if you don't feel ready for it. Food. Uh, I don't want to talk too much specifically about diet because it's such a vast topic, and I am someone who very much thinks that everyone needs to find a diet that works well for them. Everyone's different. Um, some people can exist on a very strong paleo or meat-centric diet, although that's not necessarily great for the planet. It can be great for them or make them feel wonderful. Um, some people do really well with veganism. Some people try veganism and it makes them feel like they're dying. I don't. I'm not here uh, to signal any specific diet for any specific person by any means, and I don't want to start any arguments with anyone about appropriateness of any diet or not. But finding a diet that works well for you in terms of general well-being will be very helpful for everything, for sleep included. But timing and amount of eating can be very important. Um, Again, we tend to have in East Asian medicine strong digestive energy, digestive qi in the morning. So a good breakfast, especially if your sleep is regulated, is usually pretty tolerable. Or even a large noontime meal can be great. But we tend to think that eating modestly in the evening, not starving ourselves, not fasting too much, although that does work for some people, uh, but having a moderate, lighter meal, maybe a little bit more carb centric or lighter proteins, lighter fats, not having a whole lot of protein can be helpful. The reason being is a full stomach can induce sleepiness, but eating has a thermogenic effect. So you eat, you might get really sleepy, but then your body starts warming up when it's trying to cool down. You're warming up very interiorly. And so you might fall asleep really well after a full big meal, but you might also wake up a few hours later, maybe with a stomach ache, maybe not, but not knowing why you're waking up. Um, Also, there is an idea, especially in East Asian medicine, that eating very much right before bed, no matter what kind of food it is, you're giving your body something to process when it's trying to process everything else through sleep. And so you're saying, oh yeah, we need to sleep, but really we need to digest. And so you're putting a lot of energy towards digestion, which again might help you fall asleep, but might not help you stay asleep. Similarly, being too hungry, or I guess conversely, being too hungry, it it tends to activate the sympathetic nervous system. So it tells your body, oh gosh, we're hungry and we're uncomfortable. Let's go look for food. Let's go eat. Let's go out there and be active because this is very important. Of course, that's balanced with how sleepy you are. But having a modest meal, 6 p.m., maybe 7 p.m., usually works well for many people. Or having a large midday meal and a light snack at night can work quite well. Um, I just wanted to mention this with serotonin, the neuromodulator we were talking about that induces a sense of contentedness and rest, primarily produced in the gut. So a healthy gut, healthy food practices, appropriate diet, appropriate eating times, taking time to eat, and you know, sitting with friends and family if you can while you eat, and just making that a ritual really helps for good digestive practices and can help a lot with serotonin production, which is a precursor to melatonin, which can help you sleep. Um, Exercise, again, like diet, exercise comes in many, many forms, intensities, durations, initiates a lot of changes in the body depending on the type of exercise, the time of exercise, the intensity of exercise. So I don't want to go too in depth about it. Exercise, um, regular exercise, especially aerobic exercise, is what I've heard and seen evidence for, although uh, isometric or other like lifting exercises could be, muscle building exercises can be also very helpful, generally in maintaining just health and sleep. Um, but um, it's a very yang activity, so it's eliciting a lot of changes in the body and kind of making you more alert. So think of it as increasing alertness, at least in the short term, and also breaking down muscle and changing your metabolism. So you're kind of creating all these metabolites in your body that you have to process. So if you do it right before sleep, you're creating essentially a balloon of energy and a lot of activity that you're trying to get through, maybe while you're trying to fall asleep. So that might not be the best time to exercise. Otherwise, we can kind of shift our sleep patterns if maybe you're sleeping okay, but you're always waking up too early for what you like, or you're always staying up too late in the evening because you can't fall asleep, or you just don't feel ready for sleep, or maybe you have sleep procrastination. Um, we might be able to shift that pattern when we exercise. And so The idea being that you're creating, again, this kind of bubble of yang energy with exercise. So if you exercise in the morning, you're creating a lot of energy in that morning. So you're energizing your morning. So then you should be sleepier earlier in the evening and then wake up, earlier or early-ish for you. Um, if you exercise in the morning and make that a ritual or a habit at least a few times a week. Similarly, exercise in the afternoon or early evening, not late evening, early evening, tends to increase wakefulness then, and then extends your day a little bit. And so if you're always waking up too early, exercise in the evening might help you shift over to waking up a little bit later. Um, Again, everyone is a little bit different. You have to find out what works for you with exercise, but those are some general ideas that can be helpful. Brief survey of some supplements and teas. Again, I'm not prescribing anything. I just wanted to mention some things that are relatively safe and or really common to use. One of which is not super safe that I'm going to mention, valerian root. But I just wanted to mention them because I felt like it would be a very incomplete discussion without talking about some supplements. So magnesium, usually in the form of magnesium glycinate or threonate, tend to be very helpful for sleep. If I don't do a ton with supplementation outside of herbal supplementation in terms of vitamins and minerals. I tend to stick to some pretty safe ones. And especially up here, we all tend to be vitamin D deficient. So I find recommending a safe dosage of vitamin D to most people if they're not taking it, and if it seems like it might be helpful for them. Uh, Magnesium has a lot to do with nerve transmission and moderates a lot of other processes in the body. So if you're magnesium deficient, it can be harder to create or process some neuromodulators. It can be harder to slip into sleep. You can have things like restless leg syndrome at night. So glycinate or threonate can help people sleep. Again, talk to your healthcare provider before starting anything. But tends to be pretty safe. The overuse of most magnesium compounds tends to be like a little bit of digestive upset or loose stool, so you can always back off. And just keeping things in safe ranges, of course. Most people, I think, can very safely play around with magnesium and see if it's helpful. Um, B complex, there are tons of different B vitamins, but 6, 9, and 12 tend to be helpful in different capacities for sleep. Again, something just to look into. I just want to mention it so you can have that in your mind and do more research. Taking a B complex, there's usually a couple B vitamins that a lot of us are deficient in. And I think often complex is kind of taking like a complex, like a B complex with 6, 9, and 12, or different B vitamins in it. It's kind of hedging your bets. Usually, it's not going to cause a specific issue, and if it does, it's usually mild, not deleterious to your health, and you can, and it's obvious, and you can see it and do some research and understand what's happening. And then vitamin D. Vitamin D, I find really helpful for so many people up here. It's helpful for mood regulation. Again, the emotions aspect coming up. It's helpful for a lot of processes in the body, including different mineral absorption. I think having kind of, especially in the winter, a high dose of vitamin D. Again, I'm not prescribing this, but I usually think like 2,000 to 5,000 IUs, international units, tends to be pretty helpful for a lot of people. And these are things you can also get checked, especially like vitamin D levels and B levels. You can get checked through a functional medicine doctor or maybe your primary, depending if they do that. And then you can get more information on how your levels are with that. Teas tend to be herbal teas tend to be very calming, a very nice ritual in the evening, and at the level that they are palatable, very safe, especially these ones that can be very helpful, very common. Chamomile, we've all heard of having a cup of chamomile tea before bed. There's a lot of research on different compounds in chamomile that can be helpful for sleep, and some even that are that they've isolated and synthesized, and they try to market for sleep. I don't know that much about those, but chamomile itself is a lovely tea, with a little bit of honey or something, can be very, very relaxing. And even just a warm beverage, even if it's just warm lemon water, can be very relaxing. Lemon balm is most of these are in a class of herbs in Western herbalism they're referred to as nervines. So they're relaxing and have a not a sedative effect, but in that direction of just relaxing your nervous system, just discharging any excess tension. Lemon balm is really great for that. It also has a mild antivirus action for a lot of people, so it can help you stay healthy. It has a sour function, so if you have what we think of as a yin deficiency, a blood deficiency, or a body fluid deficiency, that sour flavor can help astringe things and you can hold on to them a little bit more easily. A really common one is California poppy. That gets a little more into that sedative action, but in the amount that are in teas you might buy, again, don't go overboard with anything. Anything in too much, too high of a dosage is bad for your health. If you drink 2 gallons of water in a quick sitting, you are not going to survive probably. But California poppy can be very helpful for some people. Some people like to mix it with like passion flower. A really funny one is catnip. Catnip has an opposite effect with cats and humans mostly, not for everyone. But it can be very relaxing and calming for kids, especially. I like mixing catnip into teas. It doesn't have a particularly great flavor; it's just kind of green and herby, a little bit um, pungent, kind of like mint, but not minty. So it's a good addition to some other teas, mixing it for flavor. Or with better flavors, I'd say. But it makes cats wild and it makes us relaxed. Lavender also, just half teaspoon of lavender flowers mixed with other teas. Great flavor, very calming. Lavender has a pungent chi moving aspect, so it can help to kind of smooth our energy, preparing us for sleep. You can put lavender flower in even just as a soak for your feet. Um, Wonderful, wonderful herb. I did want to mention valerian root. I'm not recommending anyone use it. Two things about valerian root is it's a pretty strong herb and it can, in some capacities, be habit forming. It does have a mood altering capacity. It really does a lot with sleep. Some people sleep very deeply, but might feel more groggy the next day. Um, and it's a powerful herb. I have nothing wrong with valerian root. It is, I believe, where Valium was synthesized from, or at least originally isolated. So you want to be really careful with valerian root, and valerian root is something you want if you use, and if you use it at home from the raw root, you don't heat it. It's just a cold infusion. Heating it can release some other compounds that are bad for you. I don't remember off the top of my head specifically in what capacity they're bad for you, but uh, valerian root is something to use very cautiously, very occasionally if you need it, and hopefully under the guidance of a healthcare practitioner that is very familiar with its use. I just wanted to mention it because it's such a common go-to for some people, and a lot of times people think, like I was mentioning, oh, herbal tea, it's safe, there's no problem with it, but there are some herbs definitely we have to be quite careful with, or at least uh, a strong modicum of caution. All right, then there's some ideas of training your nervous system, like I was mentioning with acupuncture, kind of slipping us forcefully into parasympathetic modes, very yin modes. There are lots of things we can do to uh, often called technique, or the scientist Dr. Andrew Huberman talks about techniques of non-sleep deep rest. So these are training us to get into that parasympathetic mode and gives us these tools so that you can access it much more easily. So we have yoga nidra, which is a yoga practice that's very kind of meditative, often done lying on the floor. There's sometimes progressive relaxation aspects to it. I'm not super familiar with the specifics of yoga nidra, but a lot of people really love it and it can be very helpful. It's very yin, very relaxing. Um, Different meditations, of course, training your mind to focus and go deep and focus on your breath and sinking low, maybe into your lower abdomen or breathing into your lower legs. All different kinds of meditations, meditation apps that are both free and paid that can be very helpful. Meditations on YouTube that hopefully you're not watching on a bright screen late at night, but you can listen to. Different meditation aspects that you can use with headphones that play different tones in your ears to help induce different wave states in your brain can be very helpful. Again, it can be helpful when you need it, and it can also be helpful just as a daily practice to train you. Oh, I wake up at 3 a.m. and I can't figure out why, but I can train myself to fall right back asleep, or I can train myself to go into a deep rest state, even if I'm not sleeping, that is restorative. Progressive relaxation therapy, really quite easy to learn, all different forms that, or different processes that have kind of similar forms, I think, but generally either going from the toes up or the head down and just concentrating on different structures, on your eyes and your eyelids, on muscles of your eyebrows, your face as a whole, thinking of your ears, the back of your head, your whole head, and just working through your body in different fashions, whatever works for you. There are lots of guided meditations about it, but relaxing pieces of your body, or visualizing a light switch that you're turning off, or something that is um, shifting you physically, piece by piece, somatically into this rest state. And then this is not really a deep rest state, but things like Tai Chi um, have a very soft focus on, or they focus strongly on softness and breath and chi movement. And so they can relax your nervous system and de-stress you to really uh, help your sleep, or help other practices of non-sleep deep rest kind of deepen. So it's all things that are almost the exercise of sleep, or the exercise of maybe pre-sleep. Um, I think we're getting towards the end. So fundamental ideas. I keep going back to this: rhythms, substance, and signaling. So following daily and seasonal rhythms, finding rhythms that work for you. Some people do feel better staying up later at night and waking up later, making sure you're still getting, you know, for most people, 7 to 9 hours. Some people can do with a little bit less if they have, really good quality sleep. Um, but definitely rhythms of light and dark, paying a lot of attention to that. There's a lot of signaling there that you can work with. More sleep in winter, maybe less in summer. Sleeping routines, timing routines. Try not to vary your routines too much within a single season. Um, really follow, and really just following nature, following the sun, following the seasons. Um, Substance. So again, this is a little bit more on the healthcare practitioner side, unless you do a deep dive and you very carefully, step by step, look into this yourself. But trying to find a diet that works really well for you, creates a sense of well-being. Find a qualified practitioner, whether it's an acupuncturist or nutritionist or functional medicine doctor, whomever, that can help you discover foods and supplements and herbs that can help with areas of your body that are maybe underfunded with nutrition, are weaker, or are under-energized. And just help your body relax, help your mind relax, and slip into sleep more easily at night. Signaling, turning the lights down low at least an hour before bed, maybe using floor lights, softer lights, less in the blue spectrum, more warm and soft. Um, Signaling your optic nerve that it's almost sleep time, the day's over, it's nighttime. Uh, Again, anything you can do to just signal your body with rituals, with calming teas, that rest is coming, it's that time, let's focus our energy there. And some resources. Again, I'm going to get you guys this PDF. Hopefully, if anyone watches this in the future, they can have access to the PDF in some way, but they can also always email me. I should be able to get them all of this stuff. The Huberman Lab podcast is a very interesting Western medicine. Stanford professor of medicine, Dr. Andrew Huberman, talks about all sorts of different things. His interest in this podcast is to give people free information, tools, and techniques to live better and be more functional in their lives. Very simple, but he starts off the first few episodes with sleep. And so it's like episode 1, I think, is just kind of an overview of body structures and hormones and things like that, just very, very broad. But then he quickly, in episode 2 and 3, and later on, comes back to it, talks a lot about sleep, a lot about these ideas of light and signaling and temperature and exercise. And he goes into things like shift work and jet lag. Great, great stuff. If you're interested on the more East Asian medicine side, which I know is hard to get into often because it's a very self-contained system. There's lots of things that references other things, and you have to kind of work with it for a while before it starts to make sense. Um, there's a lot of depression first year in East Asian medicine school because it's a lot to take in until it finally starts clicking and making sense, because it's a very different lens to look at the world through. But Dr. Damiana Korka is an amazing, amazing, lovely person, great doctor of East Asian medicine, specializes in sleep. That's her whole jam. She has a great blog, a lot of free information there, a lot of very interesting, simple reads, uh, take home stuff you can do, good things with diet and exercise. Um, and then she does telemedicine. She has a lot of um, resources you can get more in depth into if you like, subscribe to her newsletter or things like that. But just great website, great wealth of information, and great jumping off point so that you can, if you are interested, you can look more specific and in depth into the East Asian medicine side. And then, of course, you're always welcome to contact me. I have my information here. This is my email. Always can email me with any questions. I love talking about East Asian medicine. I love talking about sleep.